This video is for Sight Reading Rhythm Level 2 in 4/4 time. I'm going to go through the worksheet that I handed out to everyone that goes step by step through what notes and rest are going to be used in this Level 2. And then we're going to see how to write the counts as well as how to translate that into real music with counts and claps being performed. All right, so have your pencil ready so you can write things in on your own. And I'm going to screen share the worksheet with you guys during this video. Okay, here we go. Sight Reading Rhythm Level 2 in 4/4 time. The very first section of our worksheet says dotted half notes in the box text. That's the new thing that we're adding from Level 1 to Level 2. We're going to do dotted half notes. Now, if you looked at your notation music exercises for dotted notes already, you will have seen that a dotted note always has three things. So a half note, let's draw a half note right here. A half note can be divided into two things, right? A half note divides into a quarter note and a quarter note. These are equal things, always equal things. So we've got a half equals a quarter plus a quarter. Now, when we put a dot after that half note, that dot means times 1.5. This is only if it helps you remember. I don't like that point. 0.5. Some people are very mathematically minded. They like seeing it this way, times 1.5. Some people want to hear that it's just like, oh, I get half more. So if you had a whole pizza, you'd get half a pizza for free. That's like buy a whole, get half free, kind of like a sale. You can also think of this dot as becoming the third of three equal things. So I already have two quarter notes. That's two equal things. I need to have three equal things. So what's going to go here in the circle is going to be another quarter note, which means a dotted half is equal to three quarter notes. That means we're going to have three rhythm counts because 4/4 time we're counting quarters. Three rhythm count numbers for every single dotted half note. So pay attention to that dot. It's really, really important. It means add another quarter, okay? You can have a dotted quarter note. You can have a dotted half note. You can have many different types of notes with a dot. Only the dotted half note adds an entire extra beat. So pay attention to what it divides down into. By itself, it divides into two quarters. That dot equals one more quarter. Okay. Use a large count to start a long note and small counts under the rest of the beat counts under a note with two or more beats. So just like we did half notes and whole notes in Level 1, we're always going to say, hey, here's the note head. The note head means clap. Big count, clap, 2, right? Then we've got to have some pulsing for that half note. 2 and 3 would be the half note. That dot becomes number 4. Pulse again. 2, 3, 4. All right. That's the only thing we're adding to this section. Everything else is pretty standard to Level 1. We've got a measure of all quarter notes. We've got a measure of all quarter notes. We've got a quarter plus a dotted half. We've got a quarter rest plus a dotted half. So we're just spicing it up with a rest here and there to keep you on your toes. Okay, let's count and clap this whole thing so you kind of hear the whole section, all 8 measures, starting right up here. Ready? 1, 2, ready, go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, even I'm allowed to make a goof. It's okay. This is kind of a random rhythm because it's just mixing different ideas together. So it doesn't make a lot of sense musically yet, and that's okay if your brain stutters. Just work on smoothing that out. So pay attention to when you have rests and you're using your parentheses that you're giving us an open. Pay attention to small rhythm counts because that's where you're going to pulse the long notes. Okay, we're going to add the next thing. Scroll on down here. We have a lot of instructions for this one. Beamed eighth notes. Remember beamed eighth notes. Let's take a look at them down here. We have beamed eighth notes right here. We have a note head and a note head. We're always going to count these note heads separately. These are two different notes. I have to clap twice for each one, right? One and then the other. Got two claps there. So when you're counting eighth notes, remember that it's really two different notes. This is an eighth note with a flag. This is an eighth note with a flag. We're putting them beamed together because our brain doesn't want to see 8 eighth notes with flags all the way across a measure. If every single one of these right here had a flag, our brain would go, I don't know, there's a lot, instead of counting them. When we put them together with beams, our brain goes, oh yeah, there's 1, there's 2, there's 3, and there's 4. I got 4 pairs. I can count to 4. Okay, so it makes your brain very, very happy to put them in sets, but you are clapping the note heads, not just the fact that everything's connected. Okay, always look at the note heads. All right, let's check these instructions out. 2 eighth notes can be paired together as a beamed pair on a single beat. Use a large number and a large and symbol under the 2 note heads. So that's what we have right here. We have a 1 and an and. Always an and symbol. I'm going to show you a couple of different symbols that you can use in these instructions, but we don't want to put the word and. The word and has 3 letters and it's going to take more space left to right than we're going to have available. We want to use a symbol to shorten that up into one small thing. All right, when any eighth size note or rest is present in a measure, you need to show all the and symbols, but use a small and symbol for the second half of a quarter note. And symbols can be large, like this little ampersand. It's kind of a backwards cursive S. You can also an asterisk or like a little star. We did that a lot during distance learning when we were using our computers to write this stuff instead of a pencil. But when you're handwriting, which most of you are probably doing, handwriting, you can use just a plus symbol. And my and symbol, when I write it by hand, I'm going to draw it over here, instead of a plus, I actually keep my pencil engaged the entire time. Instead of doing 2 strokes here, I just do the same motion like that in one single stroke. For me, that's an and. For you, that might not work. What I need you to be very careful of, though, is not doing something that looks like another symbol that we're going to add later. Sometimes people do one that looks like this, kind of a fish sign, but this is too close to the letter E, and the letter E is going to be used later. We're also going to use the letter A. So don't use any sort of symbol that is too close to an E or an A. Use a plus, use an and with the not picking up your pencil plus sign. You can do the ampersand, kind of a backwards S, something like that will do. You can do a star, right? Whatever works for you. Just keep it from interfering with future stuff. I'm going to clear all of that out of the way now. And it says, just make sure whatever symbol you use doesn't look like an E, which will be used later. When there are no eighth notes, you can use just number counts with the ands. Make sure you count the numbers steady with and without ands. Okay, so measure 9 right here. Measure 9 doesn't have any eighth notes. So just like when we had quarter notes filling up a measure in level 1, we're going to stick to 1, 2, 3, 4. There are no ands required because there isn't a single eighth note in this measure. But when you have a measure that mixes with eighth notes, so there's an eighth note in there somewhere, you have to use ands in the entire measure to make sure that you've placed everything correctly. Now let's take a look at a pi. I'm going to put a pi up here in the corner. And we're going to go ahead and look at a quarter of that pi. I'm going to fill this in with red for a quarter of our pi. This is representing a quarter note. right? A quarter note is a quarter of our pi. I'm going to change colors now, and we're going to look at eighths. If I cut my pizza again into eighths, right, I now have 8 pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, there's 8 pieces around here. I have 2 eighth size slices in my quarter, which means my number 1 count has to be split into 2 counts now, 2 eighth size counts. Yes, number 1 goes from here like all the way down to here, right? But we need to say half of 1. So this is the first half of 1, number 1, and this is the second half of 1, and right here, that's what I have. I have 1 and. So these are both part of a quarter. That's an eighth and that's an eighth. Okay, that's why we need to have a small size and. It says I don't want to clap here, but I do want to verbally say my ands, and I want to make sure that my rhythm counts that I'm writing into my page are all accounted for. So if I've got eighth notes in this measure, I want to see all 8 counts, 4 numbers and 4 ands. And they're always going to be in this order: 1 and, 2 and, 3 and, 4 and. Don't mix them up. Should always be a 1 followed by an and, a 2 followed by an and, 3 and, 4 and, every time. Then you've got eighth notes here, and these will line up directly with 2 and. I've got a quarter again, so I'm going to do both of these, 3 and for that quarter, and then I've got 4 and here. So this measure would be clapped with claps on the and of 2. Notice I said and of 2. This and belongs to 2. And the and of 4. This and belongs to number 4. Just like this and up in my pi belongs to number 1. So this measure right here, measure 11, would sound and be clapped like this. 1, 2, ready, go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So I had to use all my ands. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. I'm going to clap it again. Ready, go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay, practice that. It's really important. Let's go back and do measure 9 and 10. That's quarter notes and then eighth notes. So in our first measure, we can say our quarter notes just 1, 2, 3, 4. But then when we get to measure 10, we're going to say all the ands, and it's going to sound twice as fast because our numbers are still going to be the slow tempo, and then the ands are going to make it double time. Here we go, measure 9. 1, 2, ready, go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Got it? Make sure that you don't say all of the words at the same tempo. It would be really bad if you said 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and, because now you're going half speed in the second measure. You have to keep all of your counts aligned. Another way to think of this, if you take your hand, every time we cut things in half, it's really easy to say, okay, my number is here, and my and is up in the air. So I'm going to go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And then I can rotate using my words to count just the numbers or the numbers with the ands. Ready, go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So the and is always up. The number is always down. I hope that helps. All right, I'm going to erase a bunch of this stuff here so we can look at it more as a whole. I want to perform this whole thing from measure 9 to the end of this first page. And we're going to look ahead and see what's going to come up that might trip us. That's really important as you're learning. It's good to scan your music and say, where's the tough section that's going to give me problems? Because I want to find it now before it finds me. I want to practice that section before I put it all together. So we have 1 quarter note, 2 eighths, a quarter, 2 eighths, and then we have the opposite. We have 2/8, a quarter, 2/8, a quarter, which means as you go across the bar line, right? Our bar line is right here in the middle. As you go across the bar line, we're going to have 4 and 1 and. Practice that. 4 and 1 and. 4 and 1 and. Be ready for that. At the bottom here, we're using rests. We haven't used rests so far, so that's going to be like, oh my gosh, a rest. Okay, make sure that you've got this rest in your mind right there. 1 and. And then look, it's the same exact rhythm as measure 11 and 12. It's just switching the quarter notes for rests. So your eighths are in the same place, 4 and 1 and right there in the middle. That's not too bad. Okay, from measure 9. 1, 2, ready, go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and. Notice that I took some breaths. Did you hear that? I left out an and, I left out a count in 2 different places because there was no way I was going to make it all the way through that. It's really important to learn how to take a breath by leaving out a syllable. This is the same as in choir when we do stagger breathing. And I say leave out one syllable, one note, one pitch in your set of notes, and don't make it the same as your neighbor, right? So what I did is I got to here and I was like, yo, I am running out of air. I'm going to breathe here. And I think this was the other one I did, something like that. So as I'm doing measure 11 to 12, it went 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, 3 and 4, right? 4 and. And then the bottom measure had the same thing where I needed to catch a breath. The and is in there. In my head, I'm saying that and, but out loud, I need to take in air. So I'm going to drop that syllable and keep going in the same tempo, in the same pace, catching number 3 at the right time. Okay, don't let your tempo drop. All right, practice that one. Eighth notes can be tricky, and that is a big new step for level 2. All right, the second page is your practice. All quarter notes, quarter rests, half notes, half rests, whole notes, whole rest, dotted half notes, that's new, and beamed eighth note pairs, that's new as well. So 2 new things for level 2, dotted half notes, eighth notes in beamed pairs. And then you really need to be sure that when you're writing your counts in, you are including ands anytime there's an eighth note in the measure. Any eighth note in the measure, all ands. If there isn't an eighth note, you're going to keep your counts small. I'm going to add one more layer of stuff right now because we've gotten pretty far at this point. And that's that some people get into a habit of looking at like a whole note where you have these small counts and writing them really close to number 1. But I'm going to tell you why you shouldn't do that right now. If you're going along following the bouncing ball, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you get to this one, all of a sudden you have these really tiny bounces. And that means that as your eye is tracking across the page, you had this steady tempo of your eye moving straight over here, and then it went all here, and then jump to the next page, to the next line, to the next measure, and that kind of makes our brain hurt. So it's important that not only are your counts lined up directly underneath your notes every time, but also that when you get to a longer note with these small notes, that you use the space, use the entire space. If you notice, this whole space here is very similar in size to this measure of quarter notes. It's very similar in size to this measure of quarters, eighths, and halves. It's not exactly the same. Sometimes we push and pull a little bit, but it's very similar. And so we're always going to have that follow the bouncing ball thing going here, where it's going to be pretty steady, pretty even from number to number every time, right? It's a little tighter, but it's not super tight. Pay attention to that. Some people also have been trained to use dashes in here. Don't do that. It's not necessary. I've also seen people use commas. Not necessary. You're adding extra things that you don't need to see. Let's try to strip all that extra stuff away and keep it as minimalistic as possible so that you are set up for success. The more you write on your page, the more your brain has to process. So right now, I'm teaching you how to write the counts because I really want you to understand where everything is supposed to go. But eventually, you will not need to write the counts when you see a measure like this. When you see a measure like this, you'll know 4 quarter notes. Bam, I've got that memorized. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. A whole note, that's super easy. 1, 2, 3, 4. And so eventually, you'll only need to write counts in an area where there's something crazy, something weird, something new, something syncopated and odd. And that way you have a little guide, a little help for that tough section. And all the easy stuff, you can just look at the notes. All right, this section down here, you are going to complete the rest of the counts. So I gave you some examples in the first 2 lines of a lot of different things. Small ands, right? This dotted half note has 1, 2, 3, but since the measure has 8 notes as well, we need to throw those ands in there. There should always be a number and number and number and number and in every measure. Double check yourself when you finish writing your counts to make sure every single measure has 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay, and then practice this entire section, counting and clapping. And once you've done that, you should go back to the level 1 exercises on the Padlet. The Padlet has each column, right? Level 1, level 2. Go back to level 1 because you're in level 2 now and you've added some things. You're learning some things. And you're like, yeah, but those quarter notes, those were easy. Those whole notes, those were easy. I could do that in my sleep. Great. Go back to level 1 and do exercise 1 without writing any counts. Count and clap it. Just view it on your screen. Count and clap that one and see if you can figure everything out in your head by looking at the notes, not just your count numbers. Do exercise 2 a different day. Do exercise 3 a different day. That way I can kind of test you again and see what you're able to do automatically. Because the more I add, the more layers I add, you really need to have the old stuff be super ingrained in your brain. Okay? That was level 2. Good luck, guys.